Welcome to the Love Energetics Podcast. This is the space where science, spirituality, and mindset work become one with the mission of empowering you to reach your full potential and live the life that you daydream about. This podcast is all about helping you achieve a higher self-image that awakens you to your own innate power and allows you to expand to higher levels than you thought were possible. I'm your host, Marea, a scientifically trained intuitive, manifestation coach, and neuroscience expert, and I am sharing the knowledge and tools that are going to ascend you to the highest levels of growth and expansion. In each episode, I'm going to be infusing motivation and inspiration that you've been looking for to go after the deep levels of fulfillment you're secretly craving. And with that, let's get into Season 2, Episode 1 of today's podcast. And for some of you who have listened to Season 1 of this podcast and who are familiar with me, you may have wondered, where the heck have I been for 6 months? I think my last podcast episode was like in May. And what's today? Friday, November 7th that I'm filming this. It's been a wild 6 months, so I figured that the best thing that I could do for the first podcast episode back, new season, whole new rebrand on what this podcast is going to be about and what MareaManifests is all about. I mean, it's going to be so much more comprehensive, so much more life-changing for anybody listening to this, and just a whole new level up, because that is what I'm all about. I'm always about improving, becoming better, knowing more, and finding better and better ways to do things and better ways to evolve. So what better way to kind of just explain to you what's been going on and what I've been learning and what you can expect from this podcast going forward. And then we'll be able to just jump right into all of the new information, all the new teachings, all the new empowerment that I want to share with you. Guys, I'm a little bit rusty. Like, it's crazy. Like, before I was doing my podcast, I was talking on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram all the time. And then I really just took a lot of time out from doing that, and I just really went within because I felt like things were out of alignment and I didn't really know why, didn't really know what to do. So I was like, all right, I need to take a step back and figure this out. And this time now that I'm here on this podcast and just getting back out here with a lot of this work, it's never felt like a better time. It's never felt more aligned and more natural and more exciting. So that's how I know it's the right time to be back here. So yeah, with that, I will start sharing a little bit about, so essentially, all right, I don't even know how to unpack this. So this has been life-changing year for me. This has been a very busy year. So busy in the sense of like normal, like life, external life stuff, but also busy for me internally, going through basically a whole identity rebrand and just really learning about life, the universe, and what all of this stuff is all about in such a different way. It's been an externally very changed year, but also an internally very changed year. So, and that's part of the reason why I think I kind of took a step back, is because it was so overwhelming at the times it felt very overwhelming in scary ways sometimes, but ultimately it was overwhelming in the best way possible. I feel like I am on the track that I'm supposed to be on now, and I just feel really clear in what I'm meant to be doing going forward. So we love that. Over the last 6 months, I have completed my bridal era. I don't know if I really talked about that too much in the podcasts, but if you followed me on Instagram or TikTok or any of that stuff, you would have saw that I was in my bridal era. I got engaged at the end of 2023 in December, and that's a big part of my story. That's a big part of the old MareaManifests brand, why I named this podcast the Love Energetics Podcast, and all of the topics I used to talk about being relationship focused was all from my love life transformation story. So during this time, I had 2025 was my bridal era. So May was the last time I talked on this podcast. Since then, I had my dream bachelorette in Ibiza, and that was really fun. And then just did all the wedding planning, all the bridal things, which felt completely overwhelming a lot of the times. But I got married in August, and then I went on a 2-week honeymoon with my now husband in France, and all that was really amazing. A lot of it was as a result of manifestation and then self-image healing work to kind of get the desired outcomes that I wanted, but it was certainly not perfect. There were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of life lessons that I experienced along the crazy ride. And so I can definitely, I probably will at some point, but if you are interested, let me know. I can definitely share more about it. But there is so much that I learned about the wedding industry and just how getting married really impacts your life, your identity, how it really just brings everything that is limiting under the surface out and just teaches you so many lessons. It tests you in so many ways, but ultimately on the other side of it, I can say I learned all these lessons and it's benefited my life tenfold. I definitely will share more about that, but what I thought manifesting my dream wedding was going to be like, manifesting my dream bridal era was going to be like, all of that stuff. Oh my God, to think about what I thought it was going to be like to what it actually was, to what I learned coming out of the other side. I mean, holy crap, it is so different than what I expected it to be. And I've learned so much that I think could really help people as they go through their own wedding and bridal eras, and even just give people clarity for some of the things that came up for them as they went into their own, wedding bridal era. There's so much to learn about how a wedding and how being in your bridal era really affects your self-image and how things play out as a result of your self-image, result of your beliefs, result of, a lot of neuroscience and spirituality stuff. It's very interesting. So definitely more to share on that if people are interested. That's externally where I've been. So I guess I'll kind of break it down like that. Externally, I have been in hardcore wedding planning mode. Things really picked up in June and did not stop until I got married at the end of August. And then I went basically right into a 2-week honeymoon and then came back and was just, it really took a minute to kind of digest all of that and get reset. And then on the flip side of that, internally, I basically went through like a spiritual awakening round 2 and just like completely flipped my whole inner world on its head yet again, which is like, sounds crazy and scary, but it's really a really good thing because there's always more to learn, there's always more to grow, and there's always more ways to evolve. And this is really important to share too about this internal shift that I went through for this past year. This is really important to share because it's why I'm pivoting MareaManifests and pivoting this podcast and why I'm coming back at the time that I'm coming back. It's all really important to know what I went through so that you'll understand where I'm going and why. And I think that's why I'm being called to share it. We're going to take it back. I know I talked in my first episode of this podcast about my story in kind of the lens of how the love energetics method was created, which was my coaching offering of where I kind of took people through the process I went through of, healing from my past dating experiences, my abusive relationship, cheating, like all the different difficult relationship experiences I went through. I basically had a process called the love energetics method that I took people through that was with healing, achieving self-love, and, learning how to date in a way that was going to ultimately lead you to your soulmate. So all about manifesting your soulmate. So from start of like having an unfulfilling dating life in any way that looked like for people to a fulfilling dating life where they were manifesting their dream partner, basically. My story that I shared in the first episode was kind of the lens of my dating life story, not really like everything else going on. And that's like, that is what's so important. And that's why the things that I'm going to talk about are changing because, and this is one of the things, right? And so if you heard my new introduction on the podcast, I talk about reaching your full potential. And the thing about doing that, right? Going about your life with the intent of reaching your full potential and living your dream life, the thing that we aren't aware of, at least super consciously, at least on a day-to-day basis, is how much the world sets us up to not reach our potential, how much the world sets us up to play small, to settle, to dim our light, to go the safe route, to literally play it safe. Our life the way society is built, the way the world is today, it's more so in a way that is going to limit you rather than expand you, which is why I'm taking the Maria Manifest brand. I'm taking the podcast to be more of a way to empower people to live big, expand, grow, and reach your full potential, because unfortunately we have learned a way growing up that teaches us the opposite. And that's exactly what happened with me. That's kind of why I'm going to tell a little bit more of my story and my internal shifts this past year that made me all realize this. So basically, rewind to 2023 when I started MareaManifests. I started this business not as a manifest your soulmate relationship type of thing. I actually started MareaManifests to talk about all things manifestation and living the life you daydream about. So I've always stayed consistent kind of with that mantra that came into my head, and I've kind of just kept that slogan ever since. But a lot of my teachings and things I talked about was really to demystify manifestation in a way, because it was so impactful to my story. And so while I shared my story in episode 1 of the lens of how it changed my relationships and my love life and all of that stuff, it changed my entire life. Like, I basically went from being at the lowest levels of fulfillment possible in my life in 2020. It was essentially my rock bottom. I know everybody's rock bottoms look different, but for me, it was a rock bottom. I had hit a rock bottom in my life, and I think all of my limiting beliefs, my traumas, my whatever programming I had throughout my life growing up just kind of all came at me all at once. And I found myself so unhappy with my life and so overwhelmingly just miserable and depressed, and I didn't really know kind of where to go from there. I mean, no one, looking at my life on the outside, and if you knew me at that time, you would never think that, because obviously it was all a lot of stuff I kept very personal to me, but I was very unfulfilled. I was living in Boston, amidst the pandemic. The pandemic was really all where this all came to a head for me, but essentially I was living alone in my apartment in Boston during a pandemic. The world was shut down. I couldn't go anywhere or see anybody. All my friends and family lived in Connecticut, so unless I was going home, I was completely alone. I felt like I finally had, because I wasn't doing all the things to distract myself anymore, going out all the time, being with friends, drinking, going to clubs and bars and all of that stuff, even exercising at the gym. I used to work out, over exercise as a way to distract and to kind of mute out my negative emotions and all these things I didn't want to face. So basically I was kind of at this point where I had no distractions, nothing to kind of continue to have me not face the things that were causing me so much unfulfillment and so much issues in my life, really. And so that's when I completely went through this whole awakening process, my first round of spiritual awakening, which really didn't happen till it was kind of the end of 2020 was where I kind of hit my breaking point where, and this is why it's a good thing when you hit your breaking point, when you hit your rock bottom, because I was at the point where I was willing to do anything to change my life. I was all right, whatever I've been doing up until now, everything I've tried up until now, nothing has worked. Something's got to give. And so that's what allowed me to really open myself up to become spiritually awakened, just to learn that there are ways to change your life from the inside out. You don't need to do things externally, right? So yeah, if you've heard me talk about my hip surgery situation, that was where my spiritual awakening really happened, because I was no longer in Boston alone, but I was at my parents' house where I couldn't really walk without crutches. I needed help getting up and down the stairs. I couldn't drive. Everything was still pretty much shut down. It wasn't that complete 2-week lockdown that we had, but you couldn't really go out. It was that outdoor dining phase. Everyone remember that? Yeah, that was tough. But yeah, I still couldn't really do anything, and so that's when I started to just deep dive into spirituality, manifestation, and learning everything possible that I could learn. That was the first time I realized, and you want to know, and what's so crazy about this, guys, I studied psychology. I have a college degree in psychology, and we learned so much about the human brain and how things worked and, all of that stuff, but we were never really taught in the way that would change our own lives. Like, I never learned in psychology how I could change my belief systems and why a belief forms, how you learn emotions and your body stores those emotions. And the more you experience that emotion, the more it becomes part of your state of being. Like, all this stuff, like, never learned any of that in my college degree. I learned the Pavlov theory, like where the dog gets the treat and it salivates and all that stuff. Like, why was that helpful? They don't want to teach you this stuff, right? They don't want to teach you how to change your life, because then you're going to become really fucking powerful, and they don't want you in your power. That's the point. And so, something to marinate on, right? Can definitely talk about that more if people are interested, but something to marinate on. So anyway, I started to really deep dive into all of that stuff, and that's what really led to my spiritual awakening. I learned everything I could possibly find about manifestation. I got really into the law of attraction, Abraham Hicks, Joe Dispenza. Quick intermission. I had to change my setup because my phone was not staying up in the other setup. So here we are, we're back. So essentially, I went through my whole spiritual awakening process in 2021, where I started to learn that there was more to life than just what met the eye for me. So 2021, I just completely changed a lot of things for myself. And the biggest area that I saw the biggest improvement was my love life, because that was kind of my goal. Like, I was very focused on dating and relationships at the time. I put a lot of my own self-worth and validation into, how I was perceived by the male population. If they thought I was pretty, if they thought I was attractive, if they thought I was cool, even just like people in general. I think I really cared a lot about what people thought about me. That was my biggest area of focus. And because I had such a difficult dating life, and I couldn't even really think about any other area of my life because I was so focused on changing that one. I think it's also because the other areas of my life were pretty good from like the limited view I had of myself. I had good friends in my life. I was living in Boston, which is where I wanted to live. I had a good job. I had a stable job. I just gotten a new job in my career before my business was in human resources. I had just gotten a really good HR job that I manifested basically without even, knowing what manifestation was, but I just like wanted this specific job at this specific company, and I got it. That was something that always came easy to me, was getting the jobs that I wanted in HR. Everything else was like fine, I guess, for the most part. It was really like my love life was my biggest pain point, and my relationship with myself and my body and how I looked, my confidence. I always was very insecure about how I looked in a lot of different ways as well. So those two things kind of went hand in hand, and were like the biggest things that I tried to shift on my journey. And I remember this is when I got into vision boards and all of that, like manifestation, like mainstream manifestation stuff was basically all the stuff I learned that first year. I remember making my vision board for 2021, and it was like, love myself, like achieve self-love, because I knew that was something I really struggled with. Manifest my soulmate and move to San Diego, basically. So because at the time, right, it was my hip surgery. I was back in Connecticut. Wasn't moving back to Boston because obviously the city was shut down. My lease had just ended, and story for another day. I had so many roadblocks. I tried to go back to Boston. Before the California thing, I tried to go back to Boston so many times, and there was just block after block after block, which I didn't know at the time. Now I know why now, but the blocks were so obvious that even before I knew about manifestation, I was like, damn, the universe is holding me back from moving back to Boston. There must be a reason. Like, it had to get so loud and obvious for me because I was so asleep at the time and like unaware of why all the things happen the way that they do. Anyway, one of my friends from college that I had lived in Boston with, we weren't roommates at the time, but we both lived in Boston at the same time. Her and I decided we were going to move to San Diego. Looking back, that was an intuitive pull for me. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how intuition plays into all of this stuff with my brand, because I'm an intuitive energy reader now. So that was an intuitive pull for me. I felt really, really called to move to San Diego, to California. And so that was one of the things on my vision board. So anyway, 2021 was my big spiritual awakening year. I completely changed my life. I did get to a place of self-love somewhat. Like if you think before I started doing that work, before I went through my spiritual awakening, my self-love was like here. And if you're watching this versus listening, you'll see my hand is here, the floor is here. So my self-image was below floor level, like it was just as low as it could possibly be. And then after my spiritual awakening, it got, above the floor, but it's not as high as I'd say it is now, years later, right? Because 2021 was, and now we're in 2025, it's like 4 years ago. So almost 5 at this point, because it's the end of 2025. So I made a lot of improvements on my self-image, my self-love, and my confidence that year. A lot of it was really fueled into dating and relationships. I improved my relationship with my body. I improved my relationship with how I looked. I, at the same time though, was, taking a lot better care of myself. I took a break from drinking. I didn't drink for like 3 months or so, and that really helped. I started getting into lymphatic drainage. I was holding a lot of fluid in my body, which makes sense because stored trauma you're gonna hold that energy, and that came in inflammation and puffiness for me. Still work in progress today. That still happens for other areas of life, but I went through a complete just energy revamp in 2021. I moved to San Diego, I achieved self-love, I manifested my soulmate. So I had met John that year, we started dating that year, and now we're married. So yeah, that was a big 180 year for me. Completely turned everything around. The point of me telling you about my spiritual awakening is for 2 reasons. To tell you that in 2025, I went through way, way deeper and advanced levels of spiritual awakening, things that are the missing pieces that I didn't have from that year. I got a lot of the gaps closed on things that were missing for me this year. The second reason is because it has to do with the original story of MareaManifests, which was to teach about manifestation, because I was so passionate about the way manifestation changed my life. That's what I wanted. That's what I felt called to teach and do this business. So the more I got into manifestation work, the more I got into spirituality, the more I awakened myself to kind of the possibilities of what life could really be, I started to dream bigger and bigger. And so as I started to dream bigger and bigger, my perspective on being in human resources changed. And so I just started getting pull after pull that I didn't want to work for a company anymore, which, to be honest, I feel like corporate never really sat right with me. There's a whole deeper dive into my corporate HR experience, and there's so much that I learned on how all of this self-image, this energy work, spirituality stuff, how it all makes sense, why all of that happened the way that it did, and everything I learned, what my struggles and obstacles in my HR career, how those helped me today. So I can definitely talk about that if anybody else is interested in playing small and corporate when you know it's wrong for you and getting a lot of obstacles in your career. I got you on that. So that could be a whole long story in itself, so I'm not going to go into that right now. Anyway, I was in an HR job, and I was actually in the best possible version of an HR job that I had over the course of my career, because I had a lot of difficult times in my HR career over the years from when I graduated college. But then, I did a lot of the self-image work. And so when you do self-image work and you start rewiring your belief systems and you operate differently, you view the world differently, you change a lot of these limiting perceptions, your external world improves. And so my career improved in HR. And I was working at the company I wanted to work at. I had gotten a promotion, and so this is in 2023. A year and a half after getting my promotion, I was still working at my corporate job, but I had an amazing boss, which was a rarity for me. That didn't really happen in previous parts of my experience. And I had 2 really great members on my team that were my friends. They were so supportive. We all lifted each other up. It felt so divine and planned. We were all meant to be together and help each other through those 2 years that we worked together. But I was in the best possible career situation I could be in at that time. But I became increasingly unfulfilled because I as I was learning more about manifestation and more pulled towards that, I knew that that was what I was meant to really teach. And, that I was meant to teach more than, and do more than what I was doing in HR in the corporate world. And, I started to really open myself up to the nudge that I was not meant to kind of work for a big company and just kind of like do that route. I was meant to do more entrepreneurial stuff and do more aligned with this work. So anyway, I just kind of acted on that impulse, and I just started like posting from my MareaManifests accounts before I started coaching, but then I kind of worked in the coaching stuff as I went along. But basically I started teaching about manifestation and all the different things that I learned and how it changed my life and how it could change other people's lives. And I just started teaching that online. And what happened was I started getting really fueled with self-doubt over like a period of time. I don't know if it was maybe like 6-ish months into me posting and doing that stuff. I didn't really feel like it was working how I thought it was. I had these, I guess, perceptions that I was just going to, blow up on social media talking about manifestation, like all these other people that I saw talking about things, and that wasn't happening for me. And so I was like, maybe like this isn't right. Like maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, kind of thing. So then I started to doubt myself. I started to shrink and play small, and I was like, maybe I need to change what I'm doing. Like maybe too many people are talking about manifestation. Maybe I'm not qualified enough to talk about manifestation. I started to really doubt myself, and I started listening to the limiting things that other people were saying. So I started getting really caught up in learning about niching down, and that you can't talk about things that are too broad. You're not going to grow that way. So you need to really narrow it down. And so I was like, okay, the one thing that I really went from 0 to 100 and really completely changed my life in was my relationships. And I improved my self-image, not perfectly, but I did in at least my love life for the most part. So I was like, all right, that's what I feel the most qualified and to talk about. So I guess I'll just start focusing on relationships then instead. And so I slowly went away from talking about manifestation and neuroscience and energy and belief systems, emotions, and all that programming. And I really just focused all in on relationship stuff. And not that that's a bad thing necessarily to do, but I was doing it for the wrong reasons. So I was doing it because I wasn't believing in myself, and I was comparing myself to other people, and I felt less than, and I felt doubt and unsuccessful. So that's why I changed what I was doing. I didn't change what I was doing because I felt this call that was what I'm supposed to be doing. I was like, oh, I only feel qualified to talk about this. And I limited myself. Essentially is the point is I limited myself and switched my business. And that is the exact example, what I learned today and this year. That's the exact example of why so many of us play small and limit our potential and don't reach our full potential and what we're meant to do in this life, because we place limitations on ourselves, or we compare ourselves to other people, or we listen to other people and their limiting beliefs and take them on as our own. And so we stop what we really wanted to do because we don't believe in ourselves enough, or we don't think it's possible. And that's why we don't believe in ourselves, and that's why we don't reach our full potential. So that's what happened to me. So then I went down the relationship route, and it's not that was bad. I had so much value to teach about relationships too, but it still wasn't working for me in the way that I thought it was going to work. And yeah, I would coach people and have clients here and there, but I had this image that it was going to turn into such a success. Especially I left my corporate job expecting this huge success. I thought that if I didn't have my full-time HR job every day, I would put all that energy in my business, and then it would fully blow up in the best way possible. And while I did make strides for some success, it wasn't where I thought it was going to be leaving my corporate job. So again, things were still missing. Pieces of the puzzle were missing. And a big part of that was the belief in myself and the reasons for why I was doing the things that I was doing. So anyways, to kind of summarize that part, right? MareaManifests went from talking about when I was excited to talk about, right? The manifestation and just more of like living the life you daydream about kind of stuff. I switched from that to niching down to love energetics, relationship type of stuff due to a limiting belief. I played small. I settled for something it wasn't like I didn't want to talk about relationships, but I knew I wanted to talk about other things, but I was not letting myself talk about other things because I didn't feel qualified or successful enough to do so. And again, like if you think about it, right, 2021 was the spiritual awakening, and then 2022 was kind of like a coast year of the new information, and then 2023 was when I decided to take the leap and start teaching about manifestation, and 2024 was really where I like niched down and played out of the limiting mindset of MareaManifest. And then 2025 brought, the wedding, bridal era, and going full time in the business. But then I took 6 months off, and that's what all of the stuff I just told you was leading me to share about the MareaManifest brand and where it's going and all of that stuff. This brings us to the mysterious reason of what I've been up to, right, for the internal shifts, right, this year. No coincidence that I turned 30 and it was my Saturn return year. And that's something I haven't really talked about much either, is that astrology was also a big part of my spiritual awakening. That was like kind of the first thing I really dove into, was learning about the astrological transits, reading your birth chart, and just all that stuff. That's kind of how I got into like a rhythm with manifesting, is that I would use the full moon to release limiting beliefs and do shadow work and all of this stuff. And then I would manifest on the new moon, because that's what all the astrologists teach and talk about, right? I've studied psychology a lot. I am basically what you would call a certified astrologer, although I choose not to be like referred to as an astrologer, because it's really only a piece of the puzzle. It's a tool and it's helpful, but it's not the end all be all. So that's why I wouldn't want to just only be an astrologer. I think that what I am doing now going forward in the new business is like truly the key to everything, but I still use astrology and it's such a big thing today. And I think that the Saturn return is like a thing that consistently affects everybody. And it's really like you go through it like basically every 30 years. So you go through your first one when you're 30, your second one when you're 60. The biggest one is really 30. And then I guess it could be around 60. That's what people call midlife crisis. That's the Saturn return. Essentially, like the biggest thing to know about your Saturn return is that a lot of people have big external life changes happen. They either get married, they get divorced, they start a family, they change careers. Like usually that's when the biggest life shifts happen for people. And I think it's a culmination of a few things. Obviously, there's the whole psychology piece of how your frontal lobe is fully developed by 25, right? So you just like slowly start to kind of change. Like I'm gonna think about like who I was at 21 to who I am now at 30 is like, oh my God, it's like, I honestly don't even feel like that person was me. Like if I even look at videos of myself from college, I'm like, who is that? Like, I don't know. It's a show of how much I've changed my identity and all the work I've done. I don't really even resonate with that version of myself anymore because of how much I've changed. And it's not that I changed who I was. And that's what a lot of people don't get. And that's why this relates to the Saturn return, is that when you get into your older age, I think when you're growing up and you're younger and you're trying to find your place in the world, you do a lot of what you're supposed to do, right? Because of how schooling is set up. You do a lot of what you're supposed to do and what everybody else is doing because you want to fit in, you want to be noticed. Like everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people go through that. And when you go through your Saturn return in your 30s, or like turning 30, your late 20s, going into 30, you start caring less and less the older you get about what people think of you, and you start living more how you actually want to live. And that's why so many life changes happen for your Saturn return, because of that, because you've learned more of who you want to be versus who you don't want to be. So that's kind of my perspective on why the Saturn return is something that really does truly affect everybody. And that's the thing, like, yeah, I don't really resonate with who I was from college because I wasn't being who I really was. My identity was built on who I thought I had to be, who I was taught I should be. I was living for other people. I was living to be accepted and be perceived a certain way, and how I thought I had to be based on my limiting beliefs, what I was taught growing up, and I was living as a result based on life experiences and creating meaning from those and building beliefs upon that. And so I was living on an identity full of programming versus an identity of who I really am at my core. So the older I get, the more that I do this work, I'm able to deprogram all the things that weren't me. And I would know that they weren't me because they were not fulfilling. They felt more of like I have to do this more than I want to do this. Didn't feel good. It felt more restrictive. It felt more like in your body. So now I'm going through my biggest life change yet. I'm learning more and more how to be more aligned with who I actually am and do the things I actually want to do and not live for other people or live to be perceived a certain way. So that's why a lot of people go through the Saturn return, and that's why my Saturn return was such a big year for me. And it's funny because I thought my Saturn return wasn't going to be that crazy because I was already doing a lot of this identity shifting work over the years after I learned about stuff like this in 2021. But the thing that I noticed was, while I had such a big life change in 2021, learning about all this stuff, changing my love life, just leveling up, I basically leveled up to a certain extent, and then I felt like I kind of started to plateau. And so when I started MareaManifests and just trying to, once I had my dream relationship, I started focusing on other areas of my life, and I started to realize that a lot of the rest of my life, and I also, aside from that, because I started to do this work and dream bigger and not be so limited. And the thing about what a lot of people think they want in life is that you think you want something, but a lot of the times you only want it because you have a limited perception of what's possible. And if you truly knew that everything was possible, like anything was possible, and you expanded your mind that much, you would probably want a lot more than you think you want. Because when I think back to what I wanted before doing all this work in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the things that I wanted for my life, I had, and I wasn't fulfilled. I wanted a steady corporate HR job that paid well and had flexibility and have friends and travel and do whatever. I had all that. And, the things that I wanted for myself before I got into this work were very different than what I want now. And the reason for that is because I believe in myself a lot more. I dream bigger, I think bigger, and I don't limit myself as much. We always have to catch ourselves because limiting ourselves is just something we've been taught to do. And it's just a natural part of the human experience. So I limited myself in this business, like I told you. So I just don't limit myself as much as I did back then because I'm more aware of when I'm doing it, and I'm able to shift it, especially now, after all I've learned these past 6 months. Basically, going back to what I was saying before, I plateaued basically after I started learning all of the spiritual awakening stuff and changed my life in 2021. And then I kind of plateaued after that. I had my relationship. I started to inch closer to getting out of my HR job. Then I got out of my HR job, but then I was kind of hitting roadblocks in getting the career success that I wanted, the financial success that I wanted, and just wanting to continue to grow and expand and level up my life. I felt like I was hitting block after block. And I started to get really, really frustrated because I was like, damn, why did all of this stuff change my life so much in 2021 and now none of it's working anymore? What is the issue? So what I learned through all of that, and what I learned this year, which is why I'm changing the direction that this podcast and this business is going in, is that a lot of the mainstream manifestation, spirituality stuff that you hear on social media and just most of the stuff that you hear about all of that stuff, it's incomplete. It's not giving you everything you need to know to be successful. It's not giving you the pieces that you're missing. That's why I wanted to demystify manifestation. If you think about it, when I first started my career was because I was able to manifest some things. I wasn't able to manifest others. I wasn't able to guarantee that something was going to manifest. There were just a lot of gaps in things. And then when I tried to go to higher and higher levels, I was getting blocked. And I was like, this worked for me with this thing, but why is it not working for me with this thing? And so I started to get really, really curious about that. And that's why if something is not working for you, no matter how much you try and you know that you really want to do it, it's not because it's not meant for you, which is what I would usually think from old age, like mainstream manifestation stuff. It's not that it's not meant for you. It's just that you're missing like pieces of the puzzle. And so I had to go through all of those obstacles and roadblocks, because if I didn't, like if my business just got as successful as I thought it was going to be right off the bat and everything came easy to me and I was getting everything that I wanted, I was never going to look for more answers and dive deeper into this work, because I would have thought that I figured everything out and I would have just kind of plateaued my learning and my growth and all of that stuff. And I wouldn't have been nearly as fulfilled as I am now figuring out all this new stuff. Essentially, I learned that a lot of things were missing. I started, following just nudges to learn more information to really figure this out, because I had this desire to really understand how to create the life that I want. I wanted to know how to almost make manifestation like a science. I wanted to be able to know what pieces had to go in the manifestation recipe to have that outcome. What pieces in the manifestation recipe needed to be there to have my business be successful, to make a certain amount of money per month and per year, to have better friendships, have more fulfilling friendships, to move to the place that I wanted to move, to have, achieve the body goals that I wanted to have, and, all these things, and have the dream wedding. That was obvious. That was one of the biggest things that I was manifesting over the last couple of years, was my vision for my dream wedding. Like, what did I need to do? Because I had this very specific intention that I didn't want to have a stressful wedding planning era, bridal era, and it was incredibly stressful. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I wouldn't ever classified myself as a stressful worrier person, but oh my gosh, like it brought out all of that from me. And I was like, why? Like I was doing all the manifestation stuff to set the intention and change my belief systems around weddings and bridal stuff and all of this stuff. Why is that still happening to me? So I was missing pieces. But the point is that it's good that I missed all of those pieces, because then I wouldn't have learned all this new information. So essentially, that's what I've been up to. I have gone down deeper levels of understanding how the universe works, understanding the universal laws at a deeper level, the laws of the universe, all that stuff. So like before, I was really only kind of, when I was doing manifestation work, I was only really looking at a few of the universal laws. And so I didn't realize when some would cancel some out. So now I'm very aware of all the universal laws. So I'm much more able to understand why things aren't and are not happening. So that's one thing, right? And then I started to understand more about how the universe worked. And I think I had much more of a surface level learning from my 2021 manifestation experience. Like, oh yeah, like manifestation, you create the life you want. But I never really was like looked deeper as to like, well, why do I want those things, kind of thing, And then I had like that deep feeling of like the deep down intuitive feeling that I was meant to teach this stuff, but I never really understood like the why. And like I knew that we had a soul, right? But I never really understood why and like all of that stuff, I never really understood kind of like the grander scheme of things. And I knew there were such things as a higher self, but I didn't really fully understand it. I had these little glimpses of clarity, but all these missing pieces to fully understand what they all meant. And basically, I have been doing exactly that, is understanding it all. That's what I've been up to. So I know, I think I know probably 100 times more than I knew from what I learned in 2021. And, I've obviously learned more in 2023 and 2024, but like what I know now compared to what I knew 6 months ago is crazy different. Going back to, all these little quick hits of intuition stuff. So that was like another big thing, is like, I knew that I felt these intuitive hits from time to time, right? I knew that I was being pulled by a force greater than just me wanting to move to California. Like, I knew that that was a deeper seated pull. And so I would be like, oh yeah, it's my intuition. But like, I didn't really fully understand what like intuition meant at a deeper level. It was just like, oh, sometimes you're pulled to do things in a very unique way that feels like it's meant to happen. And so that was kind of like the extent of it, or like, things that you don't really understand why you know. Like, I've had so many things over the years where I was able to catch people in lies because of my intuition, or I would be able to understand when people had good intentions or bad intentions. And I just kind of had these inner knowings about things like that. And I didn't really understand kind of how that happened and where it came from. And like I said, I had the intuitive pull to move to California. I had the intuitive pull to start teaching about manifestation and demystifying it and doing all that spirituality stuff. I had the intuitive knowing that all the roadblocks in Boston meant I wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't that I was meant to be there and I was missing something. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. I got really curious about that over these, this last year basically, is like, all right, I know I have an intuition in a sense, because I know that these certain things in my life have happened on top of many other things. I have so many good intuition stories, but it was fleeting, right? It was inconsistent. I was like, all right, like, I get these knowings about things at certain times, but then other times I don't get these knowings, and other times I am blindsided and I'm like, my intuition didn't catch that. And I never really understood why. And I was like, okay, well, how can I, just like with manifestation, right? How can I start understanding it at a deeper level that I can use it in my daily life, like a legitimate skill set? Just like I have a skill set of baking, basically like doing something from a scientific way, right? Like just like the science of baking, which is kind of what I was talking about with the manifestation thing before, right? I know that if I want to make a cake, I have certain things I need to put in, and I need to put it in the oven for a certain amount of time and let it cool for a certain amount of time and this and that. And maybe over time with repetition, I start to get better and better at that skill set. And I know like, oh, it says to leave the cake in the oven for 30 minutes, but I decide to do 28 because I know that it comes out better that way. You are able to do something and you have a guaranteed outcome. I wanted that for, manifestation. And I wanted that for intuition. I wanted to be able to access it for things when I needed it. I wanted to know, like, should I be going down this path? Should I not? Am I meant for this? Am I not? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And all of this stuff, right? And so that's what I've been up to, is making intuition a scientific process, making it a consistently accurate process, something that I can use as a legitimate tool and skill set in my daily life, instead of literal decision fatigue and just like always wondering, should I do this? Should I do that? Or letting things influence me, like how I went off my course of what my intuitive pull was to talk about manifestation and creating your dream life from a general perspective, and changing to relationships because I was influenced by the wrong things. If I had had my intuition at the time, I would have intuitively been able to clock what my real mission was to do. And so I've been learning a lot about that. I've been learning a lot about just kind of following the path I'm supposed to go down and the path that lights me up and makes me the most fulfilled. And so that is ultimately where MareaManifests is going. So that's really what you can start to expect on this podcast, is just a deeper dive, deeper teachings, and just getting more of the full picture of everything. I really want to just continue to share my experiences on here of what I've learned works and what doesn't, what I embody, how it's changed my life to inspire, motivate, and empower you to change your life in the way that you want to. I think at the heart of it, the reason I was so moved by manifestation and the reason I always talked about creating your dream life was because I knew that I didn't want to settle in life. I didn't want to do things that I felt like I should do, have to do, versus what I wanted to do. I wanted to experience freedom and deep levels of fulfillment. And the fulfillment thing was big. For so many years, I felt very unfulfilled, like things were missing. Like I felt like there was something missing. And it was this clarity on what I'm meant to do in this life. And so I want to be able to empower people to do the same. I want to be able to empower people to stop playing small and stop settling and letting limitations dictate their life like they were dictating my life in a lot of times. I let my past relationships limit me from finding my dream relationship until I shifted a lot of stuff. I let limitations change my business strategy versus what I really wanted to do and what lit me up and what I was meant to do. And there's so many other examples of that, right? So I want to empower people not to limit themselves, and I want to reach my full potential in life. I know I'm not there yet, so I want to reach my full potential, and I want to keep sharing what I'm learning and doing to reach my full potential so that others who want to reach their full potential have the tools and the knowledge to do the same. So I just want to keep sharing what I'm learning, what I'm doing, what works, what doesn't, because it was frustrating so many years trying to manifest and being at this plateau and facing block after block and obstacle after obstacle and just not understanding why and going in circles of frustration and irritation and self-doubt and just wondering like what you're supposed to be doing and why is it even all worth it? Like, it's just all that crap. Like, it's just like, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want other people to have to do that anymore. So I'm just on this journey to figure it all out. And I don't have it all figured out right now. I'm not saying that. I didn't take 6 months to figure it all out, and here I am. This is going to be an ever-growing process. I'm always going to be learning more. And at my nature, I mean, that's what I love to do. Call it the Capricorn rising, call it the Jupiter and Sagittarius, but I am just a lifelong learner. I love to learn more. I love to fully understand why something works, doesn't work. I'm that person that's always wanting to know more and more behind the why, behind the deeper meaning, and just all the things behind the scenes. Like, I don't just want to know something works and just do it. I want to know why it works, how to make it better, and if something doesn't work, I want to truly understand why. And so that's what this podcast and the MareaManifests brand is really all about. So it's going to bring science and spirituality together and all the mindset stuff, so just taking that neuroscience, taking the energy, the spirituality, and making it all scientific in the sense of understanding every little piece of why it truly works and how to implement it in your life so that you can get the results that you want and stop playing these guessing games all the time. Like, who the frig wants to do that for the rest of their life? Like, I want results. Like, if I'm putting in the work, I want results, as you should. So it's going to be that. And at the end of the day, I had a lot of thoughts about, do I keep the name MareaManifests because it's so much more than manifestation? Like, that's really only one piece of the spirituality puzzle. But I decided I wanted to keep it MareaManifests because at the heart of it, that's what led me to where I am today. The desire and the love for manifestation. And ultimately, like, I do love to intentionally create. I love to create my dream life, and that's always going to be a primary love for me. So yeah, I'm going to keep it MareaManifests because I'm always going to be manifesting, and I'm going to become a better and better manifester and teach everybody else how to be a great manifester as well. And for all the people that don't believe in manifestation, I'm going to show them why it's actually legit and why it works so much better than, traditional goal setting and all of that stuff. So there's that. And then I was like, oh, do I continue with the Name the Love Energetics podcast? And I was like, you know what? Yeah. Because even though I'm not teaching the relationship coaching stuff the way that I was before with that love energetics framework of how I manifest my soulmate, I'm still going to be sharing relationship stuff here because that's obviously a really important part of life. And, there's so much to discuss there too that I'm not going to just not talk about relationships anymore, obviously. But I decided, okay, well, the reason I made the love energetics method was because I learned that I would never be happy in life without self-love. Even if I had somehow manifested my soulmate and I didn't have self-love, I would not be happy. And that's why I could theorize, intuit, if you would, why a lot of people are unhappy after they get into the relationship that they thought was the secret for their happiness, or just replace it with anything. There was some external thing that you thought once you got that you were going to be happy, and you were not. And the reason for that is because you're missing the stuff in here. You're missing the unconditional self-love for yourself. You're missing that self-image piece where you feel enough on the inside that you don't need anything external. Because at the end of the day, if you only rely on external things to make you happy, you're not going to reach your full potential. you're not going to create the life you daydream about, and you're not going to feel fulfilled. So then what's the point? What's the point of having everything and not feeling fulfilled, right? Nothing. So I still at the heart believe unconditional self-love is the key to everything in this life. And it is. I know that for a fact. So yeah, I'm going to keep the Love Energetics podcast, because at the heart of it all is self-image work and unconditional self-love, because that is what carries you to all the other pieces of how this universe works, how your life path works, and how to live the life that you daydream about and reach your full potential works. So we're keeping it as such, but we're changing the tune. We're adding, we're modifying, and we're aligning more to what I was truly meant to do, because I ultimately feel really, really called to teach this work. It's literally, it's my oxygen. It's what lights me up. Like, I could talk and do all this stuff all day long and never get tired of it. So that's why I know I'm meant to do it. And this stuff makes me happier than anything else in life, any other job or business could ever do. So that's why I know I'm meant to do it. And so that is basically what I've been up to externally, in real life, internally in here, all the identity shifts I've been going through. I can obviously talk more about I talked about it on a general level. I can talk deeper if you have any questions on that. You know, I've shared where I've been, what I've been up to in real life, externally and internally, through all of this inner work that I've been doing. I shared more about where the MareaManifests brand is going, why, where the podcast is going and why, and I hope you stick around. Anybody who's been here before this rebrand, I truly am so grateful for you, and I cherish you more than you will ever know, because you believed in me from the start before I even believed in myself. And I hope you enjoy this new pivot, because it's meant to help you way more than I could have helped you before. And that's always what I'm going to do, is keep learning and growing so I can continue to help you and serve you better than I did before. That's really the goal. And yeah, get ready for more consistent podcasts. I would love for you to comment on this podcast and tell me what you want to hear more about, whether it's anything I mentioned you have questions on, or if it's something I didn't mention that you want to know about, and see what knowledge I have to share about it. Would love to do that. So please comment, let me know. And then other than that, if you want to hear more about the new brand, where we're going, if you want to hear more about my story, where things are going, what new offerings I'm doing with my intuitive readings that I'm doing, different trainings that I'm doing, I highly recommend that you go to my website and you can read more about the different sessions I'm offering there. You can learn more about my story. You can learn more about, you can join my newsletter is what I really mean. So you can join my newsletter, because I am going to be doing free webinars and free trainings for people who are part of my newsletter community. I actually teach a lot of these concepts in newsletters. So I'm going to be giving you like newsletter type of content. I'm going to be doing free trainings for people where I can actually do like live Q&As and like get your questions answered in real time. So that would be really cool for you to check out. And if you really like this episode, if you've gotten any value out of anything I've shared, and you would like this podcast to keep going, please give me that follow so that you can support and grow this podcast so that more and more people can find out about it and change lives. And I would love if you can leave me a 5-star review so we can keep this podcast going. And yeah, let me know. I love to hear feedback, and it really like makes me feel so happy when I see that my words are inspiring and empowering and motivating and teaching others to reach their full potential and live the life they daydream about. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it was a lot about like my story again, but it was relevant to kind of move forward. So there'll be so much more knowledge and teaching going forward, and I can't wait to share it with you. So, all right, talk to you later.